Sorry. Hello there. Do you hear that? That is the sound of quiet, of silence. And if you're a parent, that's a rare sound, and you might even say it's the sound of the divine. I'm here recording in the middle of the night. My family is asleep at home in our house, and I could have just stayed home because it was all quiet there. But I decided to drive here and record this video here for our worship this week. And that was definitely worth it because it's a nice, clear night, and you can see the beautiful night sky, the moon and the stars, and so it was definitely worth coming over here. I thought I'd sit up here tonight since we're going to be up on a mountaintop with Elijah, and we're going to be encountering something very significant, a silence, a gentle whisper, a still small voice. You might already know the text that I'm talking about. It's 1 Kings chapter 19. 1 Kings chapter 19. If you haven't had a chance already to do so, you can take an opportunity now and go ahead and read through 1 Kings chapter 19, at least the first 2/3 of it, maybe through verse 12 or 14 or something like that. If you read the whole chapter or read the whole book of 1 Kings, it's even better. But tonight we want to talk about Elijah in 1 Kings chapter 19. To get us caught up here with the text, if there's only one or two chapters in 1 Kings that you know, it might be this one and the one right before it, 1 Kings chapter 18. These are parts of the Elijah narratives in 1 Kings, and basically it's sort of a showdown here in chapter 18 and chapter 19, a showdown between the prophet Elijah and this king named Ahab and this queen named Jezebel. And Ahab is the son of Omri. Omri is one of the most important kings in all of Israelite history. And you might not know that from the biblical narrative, which doesn't feature him very much. But if you look into the history and archaeology of this time period and the house of Omri, you'll know and discover that Omri was a gigantic king, had a huge economy, lots of important building projects, a huge palace that he built in Samaria. There were a lot of important things, a lot of important developments in the nation of Israel that happened under Omri. So his dynasty, which lasts for 4 generations, was very important. Ahab is his son, and that's the king that we encounter in chapter 18 on that famous showdown, which is between the prophets of Baal, 450 of them, and the prophets of Yahweh, which in this case was just Elijah. And he's really under the impression in chapter 18 and in chapter 19 that he's really the only one left, and that's going to factor into our story here pretty soon. But we're not going to retell the chapter 18 story, but there's a big showdown there. But as a result of that, those events in chapter 18, Jezebel, wife of Ahab, wants to take out Elijah, the prophet. And so Elijah knows that his life is under threat, and so he goes on the run. He runs away from Jezebel so that she won't take his life. And in verse 3 of chapter 19, we see that he ended up in Beersheba, which is super south. Like, it's not even in the North Israelite kingdom anymore. He went as far south as he could go to get out of the territory and reach of Jezebel. Went to the southernmost part of Judah. And then in the following verse, it says that he left his servant in Beersheba and went even further south into the wilderness. And the motive here is important. He went a day's journey into the wilderness and came and sat down under a tree, and he made a request to God to say, I want to be finished. This is it. Basically, Elijah was giving up. Now, that might sound like an interesting and curious contrast, juxtaposition against chapter 18 and what happened there. But anyway, you can look into that if you want to and see why that's the case. But the point is that Elijah's come to a point in his life, in his career, as a prophet of God, where he's basically decided to give up. He's gone out into the wilderness, and he says that he's had it, and that's it. So he lays down to fall asleep under the tree, and basically that's the last thing he's interested in doing, the final thing that he wants to do. But then there's an angel of the Lord that comes and gives him food and drink and restores him enough to keep him going, and then he falls back asleep under the tree. And then again, an angel of the Lord comes and a second time gives him food to eat, and he does so, and he gets some strength. And in verse 8, he, on the strength of that food, travels for 40 days and 40 nights to Horeb, which is another name for Mount Sinai. And now we get into a very interesting, significant part of what's going on here. Elijah is returning to Mount Sinai. And if you take some time to study the text here, I'm not going to go into it into detail here, but basically what is happening on a literary level here is there are tons of parallels being made between Moses and Elijah. Some contrasts, some differences, but overwhelmingly these parallels between the person of Moses and the person of Elijah and that prophetic tradition. So Elijah is going back to the place where Moses first encountered God, where Moses first received his call, and of course the place where the covenant was made, the place where Moses receives the Ten Commandments, and all the stuff that happened at Mount Sinai with the Israelite nation. But Elijah decides to go to Horeb, to Sinai. And we have to ask why. It doesn't say explicitly in the text, but we can probably assume that Elijah, if he doesn't, if he's wanting it all to be over, he's kind of making a decision. Either it all ends now, or I need major renewal. I want to go back to the place where all this began. I want to go to this place of spiritual significance at Sinai, and he either wants his ministry and basically his life to be over, or he wants a major encounter with God and renewal and rejuvenation and some experience of this divine call to know that he's doing what he's supposed to be doing. So maybe that's why he's going to Sinai. Let's go to the place where it all began, and I think he's expecting for God to do for him what God did for Moses and for the people of Israel there at Sinai. He's expecting the earthquake and the wind and the fire and the lightning and the voice of God. He's expecting that. So he goes to Horeb, Sinai, And the most interesting part here, verse 9, he came to a cave and lodged there, and behold, the word of the Lord came to him and said, "What are you doing here, Elijah? What are you doing here?" And I think that's a really fascinating and profound question, one that is worthy of our reflection. Because I don't know if Elijah really knew the answer to that. And if he did, I don't know if he was able to give words to express exactly why. I don't know how he would have, I don't know if he knows the answer to that. I think he's looking for some kind of renewal, some kind of answer to what's going on in his life. But what he says to God is this: "I've been very zealous for the Lord, the God of hosts. The sons of Israel have forsaken your covenant, torn down your altars, killed your prophets with the sword. And I alone am left, and they seek my life to take it away." So basically, he explains how and why his life is basically fallen apart. He's not really answering the question, "Why are you here?" Except to say, "Because I don't know what else to do. I don't know why I'm here. If I'm not going to set out under the tree in the wilderness, then I don't know what else to do. I'm going to be coming here." Elijah might not know exactly why he's there, but God does. And that's really the point of this narrative, the point of this story. God understands why Elijah is there, even if Elijah himself may not. Because he's there for a new perspective. He's there for renewal. Elijah might think that he's there to have some sort of mountaintop experience with God, the literal mountaintop experience with God, to encounter him in some powerful way, to restore his faith, his experience of God, and to have more energy and to restore his passion for what he's doing. Well, he's not going to get that. He's not going to get the type of mountaintop faith experience that he was anticipating. But he's going to get something much more deeper, much more profound. He's going to gain perspective, and he's going to gain renewal in his life, in his prophetic ministry, in his faith. So what happens in the text is that God says, "Go stand on the mountain before the Lord." And behold, the Lord was passing by, just like with Moses. And the text says that there was a great and strong wind that was breaking the mountains and the rocks in pieces. But unlike the Moses narrative, the Lord was not in the wind. And after the wind, there was a great earthquake, just like this Sinai experience. But the text says the Lord was not in the earthquake. And after the earthquake, a great fire, but the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire, a sound of a gentle blowing, or a gentle whisper, or a still voice, or the sound of silence. There's different ways that people translate that verse, and no one knows what it means for sure, except it's the opposite of all the stuff that's come before it. You have these huge parallels with the stuff that was happening in the Sinai experience that Moses and the Israelites got. The Sinai experience is the fire and the wind and the earthquake and that sort of thing. And Moses experienced, or Elijah experiences the same phenomena, except God isn't in those things. And at the very end, something new, something different something different than the Moses narrative was this gentle whisper, this still small voice. Some even translate it as silence. But whatever it was the voice of God. The narrative continues here that Elijah wrapped his face in a mantle and went out and stood at the entrance of the cave, and the voice said to him again the same question, "What are you doing here, Elijah?" This is the sort of existential question that apparently Elijah needs to face. What am I doing here? Who am I when I'm here? And he answers in the same way. I've been very zealous for the Lord, the God of hosts. The sons of Israel have forsaken your covenant, torn down your altars, killed your prophets with the sword. I alone am left, and they seek my life to take it away. So once again, Elijah is on the way to getting it, but he still doesn't. God here, if you read the rest of the text, you'll see that this is not just a renewal of the prophetic commission of Elijah, but it's a renewal of his own spirit, of his own faith. And it's a renewal of his perspective. It doesn't take a lot to realize that Elijah is in a very tough spot psychologically when he arrives in the wilderness and, of course, when he gets to Horeb. He's depressed. He is distraught. He is in despair. And when you're in that state, you end up in a position very much similar to Elijah. And it's really interesting how Elijah has, in this state of depression and despair, not only does he have this exaggerated amount of self-pity, but he also has this exaggerated amount of self-importance at the same time. And if you've never been in a place like Elijah has been psychologically, that might not make sense. But there's this weird thing that happens to you where you can think, I'm the only one that sees things clearly. But at the same time, you have a ton of self-pity. And then the way that you begin to interpret your surroundings, the people around you, there's kind of a distorted perception of reality and a distorted misinterpretation of what's going on around you, about what people are doing, the people around you are doing, how you interpret their words, how you interpret their actions. All of that is kind of rolled into this experience of Elijah, and basically his despair, his depression, his mental state is making him so that he's not able to see clearly. He's misinterpreting the situation, misinterpreting what other people are like and their faith and what they're doing, misinterpreting himself, misinterpreting God and who God is. Elijah doesn't know that at the time, but God does. And so he's called him here to deal with that. And in this slow process of slowly asking the questions, he speaks to Elijah in the way that he needed to be spoken to. Not in the fire, not in the earthquake, not in the wind, but in the gentle whisper, the most intimate form of speech. And in that voice, Elijah finds perspective. He finds truth. He finds renewal in the most unexpected way. Not the way that he was anticipating, but the way in which he needed. A way that renewed his faith, a way that gave him the perspective he needed, and the rejuvenation to keep going in his life, in his ministry. So there's a lot more in this text to look at, But I just want to leave it on that note. I want you to think about how your situation, how you can relate to Elijah's situation. Maybe you are running low on faith. Maybe you're in a place that's similar psychologically to what Elijah is dealing with. Maybe you're struggling with misinterpretation or misperception of yourself or God or things around you, and you're needing renewal. And maybe that renewal isn't going to come in the way that you'd like it to, in the way that you anticipate it coming, in the way you try to manufacture that sort of renewal. But it will come in the way that is most helpful. It might even come in a gentle whisper, a still small voice. It might even come in a night, in a place like this, in the silence. So be paying attention, be listening for that still small voice of renewal, of perspective, because God is faithful. Blessings to you on this Lord's Day.